Welcome to this episode of Forgiving the Girl Inside, a Matter of the Heart. I'm your hostess, Lisa Drennon, energetic mindset mentor. And today we have an incredible life coach that is going to share her modalities of her healing journey. Please welcome, and I don't have my notes in front of me, so just bear with me. Meg is a life coach who is passionate about walking with people who want more out of life than just the status quo. And if you're out there going through the motions of life, getting up every day and just expecting what's going to expect, not really looking for any adventures, or maybe you're chasing your dreams instead of living your dreams, there's so much to appreciate about life. And Meg shares that she believes that life doesn't have to work out exactly the way we think it should in order to be enjoyed, and that people don't have to be perfect in order to be loved. Perfectly imperfect. Welcome, Meg. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us here.
Oh, I'm so thankful to be here. And I love what you talk about with the status quo, right? Because so many of us feel like, oh, I'm just sort of going through the motions and we don't have to do that. So I love the fact that you put the emphasis on that.
Yes. So tell us, what was your journey like before you hit that darkest moment in your life?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing because I sort of grew up in an environment that was dark.
Mhm.
I unfortunately came from a family that, although they loved each other very, very much, they had no idea how to express that love. And so, very often, that love was expressed in ways that were more painful. Things like, there's expectations to be a certain way, and if you weren't that way, then there were definitely consequences, and I would call them punishments for not measuring up that way. Now the intention behind that was good, but the experience was so difficult, especially if maybe you're a child that was a little more sensitive, which me and some of my brothers were. Then to be in that environment where when you didn't measure up, there was such a severe punishment for that, it really sort of put a cap on what you thought was possible for yourself. And for me personally, what I ended up doing is just sort of building a shell of a person that I showed the world. So, yes, I was this, well put together, friendly, kind, loving person to the outside, but inside I was extremely broken. And I sort of had this idea that at some point in time when I would become an adult, then everything would go away. Like I would magically, be able to control my life and everything would be fine and I would be free, right? You have these like beautiful little ideas when you're a child. And I hit my 20s and got the things that I thought would make me feel better. My husband, we had a good life together, we had a home, we had a business. And it was then that I realized, oh, that's not enough to heal what's wrong inside. And I actually had to go into that place where I went, okay, it's time to actually turn inward, no longer just concerned about the things that are happening outside of me, but it's time to turn inward and say, what is happening inside of me that's causing me to struggle? What's happening inside of me? What don't I want to face? That is really the key to joy in life and fulfillment in life, that I haven't looked at yet. And that became, like you said, a dark time, um, because it's never fun to look inward. It's never fun to dig into your shadow and try to find out your blind spots and look at, and for me, this was a big one, look at what my motivation had been my entire life. I came across as the type of person who was very loving, but my motivation for everything that I did was fear. And so behind that fear, there was a selfishness of, I'll please you to get what I want. I'll please you to get what I want. And when I realized that, it was such it was such an emotional thing. I remember realizing that and just tears kind of just falling because here I thought I had been such a good person my entire life, and to now have it exposed that actually what I had been doing is I had very refined ways of manipulating people to get my way. It was a very humbling experience, and unfortunately, it was a yeah, very, very painful, time for me, but it was something that was necessary to go through.
I find that interesting. I too was a people pleaser, and I did it hiding behind the happy face. If you knew the
Yeah.
real me, you wouldn't like me, nor respect me. I find it I've never heard anybody admit that they were a manipulator. So how did you come, that word has such a strong, when you said that word, it hit me like right in the heart, because it was, I grew up with a lot of manipulated people who manipulated me, gaslighting and all of that. So when you say that you were a manipulator, how did you recognize that? And like, can you give us examples of like what you would do?
Absolutely. It's such an interesting thing because I was probably the most pleasant manipulator ever because I most certainly wasn't hurting people. I wasn't, doing behaviors that would make them think they were crazy or that would, make them doubt themselves. But I was manipulating people by allowing them to be reliant on me so that I became a bigger part of their life so that I could get the love that I wanted. Right? So
Yeah.
let's say I had family members that had something important to them. Well, I would really support that important thing so that I became someone that they relied on, and I would meet their needs. Oh, if they needed this, if they needed that, I would do it. But I realized that I was making what other people thought was important important to me so that I could get their attention. So although it was a pleasant experience, but it was still manipulation, because did I really care about the thing that they were passionate about? No, not really, right? So I was very strategic about going, "Oh, okay, this is important to you. So what I'll do is I'll make it important to me too, and I'll say, let me help you and let me do this for you and let me do that for you, and why don't I take over this part of the project?" And they were like, "Oh my word, you're amazing. You're a godsend. You're so lovely, blah, 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 blah." And meanwhile, my little, ego was just being stroked, like, oh, just, so
Mhm.
I didn't seem like the evil maniacal manipulator, ha 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 ha, but it was the same thing. It was just more refined, right? And that's an
Mhm.
interesting thing because we forget, just because the way we do it is more refined, just because the way we do it is more pleasant, it doesn't mean that it's good, right? And society will reward a person like me with lots and lots of friendships, lots and lots of, connection, and with lots and lots of what I call fake love, because they didn't know the real me. They loved the me that I was pretending to be. Um, but it's still a dangerous game to play, and it's still extremely painful. And it's also painful once that person realizes, no, you didn't care about the things that they cared about. You were in it for something for yourself. And so even though it's more refined, and society will applaud it because they don't recognize it, that doesn't mean it's good, right? And that was difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. And just all the conflict that you must have had inside your inner child, and just going back and, between the heart and the mind, and, the thoughts, and, just constantly being in this turmoil of, I imagine, ouch, I imagine it was happy, sad, um, kind of like that emotional roller coaster ride that you were on.
Yeah.
So when did you finally have enough? What was that pivot point?
Yeah, it's interesting because I there's an author that I really appreciate, and his name is Richard Rohr, and he says something that I found to be very, very fascinating and true. And he says all great change comes either through great suffering or through great love. And for me, when I was 25, I had my first son, and I looked at him and I went, I never want him to have the life that I have. And it was this great love that, because I'd been through suffering. I'd been through suffering,
Mhm.
and I have an amazing tolerance for suffering. Suffering wasn't doing it for me. But when I finally had my son, I went, "Oh, I am his example. He will model himself after me." And of course, his dad as well,
Mhm.
but he will model himself after me. And so I need to be rock solid in integrity. I need to be the best and most authentic version that I can be. Now that's very, very different than perfect. I don't have to be perfect, but I need to be his mama, and I need to do it in a really, really good way. And so that was when I first began to say, okay, I need to change. And then 2 years later I had my second son, and my second son was born with high functioning autism. And so his needs were completely different than any other child. And it was then that my true self had to come out even more so, because there was no way that child was ever going to people please anyone. Like if you, and for every child on the autism spectrum is different, but my child is very authentically himself, and he will not change for anyone. And society be damned, he's going to be himself. And it was such an eye-opening experience what that looked like again. And then to go,
Mm,
I need to advocate for that. I need to say to society, make room for this kid. And what I had always done instead was model myself for everyone else. So having that responsibility again to be his mother was that moment for me that I went, okay, I thought I was doing it with Roan, and now I realize with Harrison, boom, I got to go even bigger. And then it was no holds bar. Like then it was just, I was on a train, and I was going towards a different kind of life, and it was a really beautiful, beautiful experience. I had the best motivation.
yeah, kids will definitely do that for you,
Yeah.
motivate you, because you don't realize how much your actions speak so loudly. And they
Yeah.
do. I think they take after the mom more than the dad, just because dad's usually not there during the day, he's out working or something. Of course, in the last 18 months that may be different.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes swapped as well. But yeah, our actions speak so loudly, and it's amazing how we can see through somebody with autism, Asperger's, or any limitations that way. They're really not limited. They don't have the roadblocks, the hazards that we put in front of ourselves, because they just don't. They're so in the now, and it's such a beautiful thing to watch, to see how their minds work, and just be like, I want to be like that. Why can't I just be me? And because we believe that there's all these rules that society has, but I mean, who made them up, and are they true, and why do we believe them? So really, captivating our thoughts and just really like looking at them and then responding is so important. And people who can do that just naturally are just fascinating, because it's like no
Yeah.
limitations. You're living in the now, and you get rid of all that, those expectations that where did they come from and how did they get there? So I'm glad you were able to pivot away from that, and it's almost like you kind of like shed your old self, and we're immersed with
Totally.
this beautiful new person
Yeah.
that totally got that. So what modalities did you implement to help you get to where you are today?
Yeah, you know what? It's such an interesting thing. So I started my self-help journey, and then the first thing obviously that I did was just try to get all of this information, right? Like you go and you're just absorbed in all this information that you didn't realize was out there. But for me, the biggest thing that I needed to realize, and I actually ended up getting a life coach myself. So this was way before I was a life coach. This was in my 20s. I'm in my 40s now. Um, I ended up getting a life coach. And what we really worked on is how do you feel about yourself? Because although
Mm,
my parents always meant well, and although my parents loved me deeply, they never sat down and talked about, hey, how do you feel about yourself? Do you love yourself? Do you admire yourself? Do you respect yourself? Those conversations were never had, ever.
mhm,
And so what I realized is I don't really love who I am. I don't really have any type of respect for myself. And so finally digging into, what stops me from loving myself? What parts of myself do I actually need to accept? What parts of myself have I rejected for years that actually I need to incorporate? Right. And like I said, being a mom to two boys, I really had to like get this other side of me that I'd always thought was wrong or bad or whatever. I needed to reject it. Now I needed to embrace it. I needed to speak up. I needed to have an opinion. I needed to set boundaries. All of those things that for me had been considered bad or wrong. And for me, I had grown up in a religion which really spoke highly of self sacrifice. And so even that was part of the damage done, although the religion itself is a beautiful religion. But for me, this message of self sacrifice only made me even worse, so to speak. I'm using bunny
yeah.
ears quotation marks, but I'll use that kind of loosely. And so first, this idea of finding my own worth was huge, and understanding that I actually have value, that my life experience can be validated, my opinions can are valid. It's okay that I think differently than other people. Really digging into those things, excuse me, those things was huge for me, and definitely my first step.
Yeah, and it's so important, and that asking your anybody out there with kids, asking them, what do they think about themselves? Where do they see themselves? Like, do they want to get married? Who do they want to marry? What is their spouse going to look like? What kind of, characteristics, attributes do they have? Where are you going to live? We don't ask our children that. And I know I was well into my 40s before someone said, well, where do you want to be 5 years from now? Like, I don't know, not here, not where I am right now, but it was such an invasive question that I was like, wow, no one's really asked me those things before. And to be able to dream and then reverse engineer it and really write out that, like you said, that self-help, that self-love journey, and the power of writing it is so important for our subconscious, because then it's going to remember it and we're going to actually act on it. So that's beautiful that you had the life coach. You knew you needed that accountability partner, someone to walk you through and kind of keep you guided and hold you accountable for making these changes, because it's a daily healing journey to say, no, I'm not going to go back to that old way. So what advice would you give somebody that's struggling with what you went through?
Yeah, it's interesting and I love the word that you use, people pleaser, right? Um, and so many of us as women are sort of trained up to be that type of person. So I'll use that wording. But if you have this history, or even right now, if you look right now and you go, wow, most of what I do is people pleasing. The first awareness, I think that's really, really important, is that it's a choice you're making for yourself so that you can get your needs met. So often we go, well, I have to people please because of these people around me, right? Like I have to make them happy. No, it's your choice and you're doing it so that your needs can get met. And the reason I say that that's the first awareness that you need to have, just like I needed to be aware that, oh, I'm manipulating these people to get the love that I need, is because it puts you back in a power position. Because so often as a people pleaser, you think other people have the power. Well, I'm only okay if they're okay. I'm only happy if they're happy. I'm only, safe if there's no problems. And so you're giving your power away to everyone. Everyone else gets your power. And I was so bad. If I went to the grocery store and the grocery clerk didn't smile at me, I would give her my power. I would be like, oh, what can I do to make her happy? Oh, I can do this and I can do that. And I can smile and I can ask about her day and I can make a funny little quip about the sale that's on about the bananas, just so that she'll smile at me so that I'll be okay. Right. And so this awareness, like, I'm not doing that for her, I'm doing that for me, is important because it puts me back in the driver's seat. It makes me go, oh, this is a position of power. I control these things. Nobody else controls them. I'm not actually that concerned about her. I'm really concerned about, will I get validated? And so that awareness, I think, is really, really important. And then after you get that awareness, really tapping into, what are my values and what are my desires? What do I really want and what do I really value? Because what we often do is we make everybody else's values and desires most important. And when we go, no, this is what I value. Like for me, when I got into it, I went, once I know I'm worthy, and I go, well, what do I value then? If I'm this worthy human being that deserves respect and deserves to be validated in the world, and I'm making these changes in my life, and my actions are reflecting my own new self-respect, what do I actually value? And I realized I value equality. Well, okay, great. If I value equality, then when I walk into a situation, each person is equal, including myself. So, what does that look like in the world? If I'm going to go with complete equality and I remove hierarchy from myself, unless it's growth hierarchy, you know, cultural hierarchy doesn't matter anymore. How does that mean I start treating people? How does that mean I show up? How does that mean I speak up, right? So I dig into my values and what do I actually want, right? Outside of just people pleasing and getting my little needs met, what do I actually desire in this world? What do I want to create? Where do I want to go? Because when we are people pleasing, we're motivated by fear. And when we're motivated by fear, our options are very limited. But once you can get motivated by love for yourself, love for your neighbor, love for everyone, once you have that motivation, well, then what do you want to do with that? Like, where do you want to go with love? You all of a sudden get pulled instead of pushed, right? When you're motivated by fear, it's literally like someone is pushing you. Well, we all hate to be pushed, right? If you've ever had someone push you, it's like, what the heck is like, why are you pushing me? What the heck is going on? Nobody likes that. And that's what it feels like to be motivated by fear. But when we're motivated by love, it's like someone's pulling us forward. That's beautiful. So then you can start to really dream about, what are my desires? Where do I want to go? What do I want to create? And then you begin a fascinating journey.
Beautiful. And we're all created to love, just to love. I know Bob Goff is one of my favorite authors, and he wrote a book called Love Does. and it's just all
Mm,
about seeing people for who they are and just loving on them, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all looking for. Our heart is just looking for that love. Well, thank you so much. You have a beautiful story. I love how that transformation just took you from that, it's almost like inward to the outward transformation. So
mm,
that's beautiful. So our
absolutely.
audience, in the description, our audience will be able to get in connection with you. I see you have your own podcast,
Mhm.
the art of being
The art
you,
of being human.
the art of being human. Thank you. And then you have relaxexcellentliving.com. Is that your website? Did I
Real
say that
excellent
right?
living. Yeah. Yeah. Real
Real
excellent
excellent
living.
living. Okay. Should have practiced that beforehand, but my audience
It's
knows that
okay.
I don't say words correctly, and it's okay to stutter because that's who I am.
Absolutely.
And this
Absolutely.
real, yeah, real people talking real stuff here. So there's no Hollywood added, scripts, cleanups, or anything like that. It's just two
I
real
love
women
that.
talking about real
That's
stories.
beautiful.
So if you are in a position where you've been people pleasing, you have been relying on others to get that fulfillment, that to fill that void in your heart, you definitely need to connect with Meg. Go to the description. You'll find the links to connect with her. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you can also get it in the description as well. You should be able to get a clickable link there. And if you know anyone that would benefit from hearing this, from hearing Meg's story, please share it with them and give a review, add some feedback. You have some comments. We would love to hear from you, love to hear what your biggest takeaway. And remember, whatever journey you are on, it's a daily healing journey, and it's all a matter of the heart.